Okay, so today's conversation is a really special one to me because it has been a long time in the making. So, some really quick background. I am Black and I am gay and I am from Texas. So, all of those things mean that I was raised and grew up in the church and in Black church specifically. As you all probably know, the Black church can and is often a harmful space for women and queer people. And women and queer people will also tell you that there are many things about church that we still hold dear and are precious to us despite that really tense and difficult relationship. So I got a chance to talk with a friend, Jarrett Hill, about what his experience at Harvard Divinity School was like. He went with some questions of his own, and so I got a chance to ask him about those and what he learned in Harvard Divinity School and how that has changed his perspective on the Black church, TM, and faith-based spaces. You'll hear a lot of it has to do with being community centered, which I think is really, really cool and was not necessarily what I was expecting the conversation to go or what I expected his experience to be. But I think that hearing about his journey was just really, really informative for me. And I hope that it is for you as well. I'm a fan of Jarrett's, and that comes across in the interview. There are just like a bunch of things that I thought were really cool about him wanting to do this and him being done with it. Yeah. The goal is to have this conversation with Jarrett, who went back and was approaching these things from a theologian's perspective, from a Bible scholar's perspective, as opposed to being indoctrination forward. So this is Important Context with Ryan Sides. Back to Black church. I cannot wait to hear what you all have to say on the other side of this. Okay, we are here with Jarrett Hill, journalist, cultural commentator, critic, many multi-hyphenate titles. I want you to, for the people that might be being first introduced to you through this episode or who have interacted with you online but aren't exactly familiar with your background, just kind of give us like the rundown, like where you've been.
Over the last year, you mean?
Yeah, the last year and just kind of like your career background.
Yeah, okay. Hi, my name is Jarrett, and I I appreciate what you were doing just now of like putting a title like journalist, like that has been one of the through lines of my career, to be quite honest, of trying to figure out like what do we call you, right? And I used to use this language that I haven't used as much, but it still applies, of being unapologetically tagless, which
Mm,
I used to use that in college because I was like, when I would show up in a place, like people want you to be a thing. They want you to be a
yeah,
journalist. They want you to be a writer. They want you to be an accountant. They want you to be a doctor. They want you to be a lawyer. Like, but like when you say that you do multiple things, it's funny to me that people are still like bewildered by that, right?
yeah,
Like when we see so many people doing so many different kinds of things. So throughout most of my career, I have been professionally, I have worked as a journalist, starting out in 11th grade on the newspaper, and you know that showing up in various different iterations, working in radio and TV and digital and all those different things. And I've also been an artist in that I've in various different kinds of ways in graphic arts, in interior design and experience design and those different kinds of things, of events and things like that. And then most recently, I've been at Harvard Divinity School, where I've been studying religion and public life, is the master's that I just graduated with, looking at the Black church and how Black, queer, and trans people have shown up in that space, and been
yeah.
that was kind of the focus that I went in with. And then by the end of it, I was a lot more focused on ways that I can serve that community, which we'll talk about more. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I've been working more lately as a visual artist and doing paintings and sculptures and those kinds of things. I did my first exhibit at Harvard, which is called An Artist Lives Here, which there's a whole story behind that. But I did that in May, and now I am on a little bit of a break and getting ready to go into sabbatical for what I'm hoping will be 3 months.
Yeah.
I've never done that before, but I'm really hoping to get some rest because I've been tired.
Yeah. Yeah. And for everybody watching and listening, I'm going to link to An Artist Lives Here, the write up for HDS, so that you all can read it. I was in it and reading through the interview over the past week. So some of the questions come from like the things that you talked about there. Um, can you, just like as our foundation setting, can you describe what your relationship to religion and the Black church were prior to going to divinity school, and
Hmm.
how, if at all, it's changed since you finished?
Big question. I grew up in church. So like I went to my uncle's church when I was a little boy. I was there until I was about 9. When my parents divorced, we moved to a church that was more local to us. And that ended up being my home church for the rest of my childhood until I moved away to go to college. Um, Grew up mostly Baptist. My uncle's church was a holiness church, which was a different experience, sort of, but I grew up in a Baptist church after that. And then in college, I was in Atlanta, where I am right now. I was at New Birth with Bishop Eddie L. Long, which, you know, as a queer person, that got interesting
Yeah.
to see evolve and change. I've been a member of various different churches throughout my life. I've had like a in and out kind of relationship with church, but that has always been distinct from my relationship with God.
Yeah.
My relationship with God has always um, felt connected and um, I would say pretty solid. But my relationship with religion and church has been the thing that's been really difficult as a queer
Yeah.
person, as a Black person, as just a Christian trying to understand what we were talking about all the time. Um, That's been difficult for me. And so I've had various different instances of like being part of a church and then also ended up usually serving in some kind of capacity. And then in more recent years, finding myself like resistant to getting that involved because of how it tended to change the experience for me,
Yeah.
and frustrate me and make me ask questions that I couldn't get reasonable answers to. And so, yeah, as I was entering divinity school, I was going through another period of feeling like my church experience was pissing me off too much. Um, and part of it was my church experience, and part of it was my interactions with my pastor.
Mm.
As he was moving to a different church, and I had requested time to talk with him about queerness and how it shows up in this church particularly. Um, and always getting like, yeah, I would love to chat with you. It's so important, blah, 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 in person. And then emails never get responded to,
Yeah.
or the assistant can never find the time, or, you know, and like it does that for 2 weeks and then 6 months and then a year and then 2 years and then 3 years, right? But
Yeah.
when I see you, it's important and you want to talk about it. And but you're out of town and you're here and it's like, but there's always a reason not to do it. And that got really frustrating for me. Because I was like, I'm not even I'm a person whose name you will call from the pulpit
Yep.
and you'll comment on Instagram,
Yep.
but you won't have a conversation with me.
Yeah.
That's a problem for me. And so I started to feel uneasy with the pastor and leadership and him and his leadership, but also in the ways that I saw church demonstrating what it believes and what it requires. I think about very practical elements of church that always make me uneasy and feel more like religion than God.
Okay.
I think about like raising your offering before we give it, right? And as a person who has been poor through much of my life, my adult life specifically, there's often times when I don't have money to
Yep.
give. And now I'm embarrassed because I don't have anything to raise up. And now I'm uncomfortable and awkward. And like, you want me to raise my open hand or whatever. What does this have to do with God?
Yeah.
right? What does this have to
Yeah.
do with any of that? And so, like, those kinds of things, but there's like dozens of those different kinds of things that happen in church that feel like this is about institution, this is about power, this is about submission, this is about
Performance.
allegiance, about performance, about alignment with the church, but
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it has anything to do with God or what God said or God believes or God is doing. And so by the time I was leaving to go to divinity school, I had another fracture moment with my pastor that I was like, I don't think I can do this, and still like
Yeah.
dabbled and started going to other churches, but and eventually ended up leaving my church while I was in divinity school. That I have been attending mostly virtually, but also flying into that city. Um, I'm not even like really trying to hide what I'm talking about because I think that's also helps these things to continue. I'm talking about
Yeah.
Dallas. I'm talking about Torrey Roberts, my former pastor. I'm talking
Okay.
about the Potter's House. I'm talking about TD Jakes, right? I'm talking about that family of things. I'm not talking about
Well-known
Sarah Jakes
church
Roberts.
institutions.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not talking about Sarah Jakes Roberts because I haven't really interacted with her much. Um, but I'm frustrated with the ways in which the Black church and churches in general show up in the world and how they impact people in ways that I don't think are the stated goals.
Yep. And I love that that you are saying the names and like being specific um as we are having these conversations to call people, institutions, organizations in, just like the importance of being able to like speak specifically to these things and being able to say like this is what my experience was here, to be able to like effectively challenge, to be able to like effectively have those conversations, as opposed to protecting the thing, protecting the behavior rather, that has caused us to leave or caused us to have these experiences. So I appreciate that. I love that. Yeah, okay, as we are getting in and as you have just kind of like laid the foundation for like where you are and what got you here, I want to take it back to your announcement that you were going to divinity school. And so you said that the following reasons: study how the Black church has impacted Black, queer, and trans people and how we've impacted it, study Christian theology that treats us like the creations of God we are, better tell our stories, and make communities of faith safer for us. Do you feel like your time now on the other side of it at HDS positioned you to be able to address these things?
Yeah. So when uh, the cohort that I was in, like you have to submit a statement about like what you're coming for, like what you want to do. And I wrote this piece called "I'm Coming for Our Freedom," and it was about how I was feeling about where I was in church, where I was in like religion, and what I wanted to see change. Um, a lot of this was catalyzed by an episode of Fanti, the podcast that I used to host, that was called "When Gospel Music Slaps and Leaves a Mark,"
So, yeah.
in which
But
we
I love that
talked.
title, by the way.
I always have to give the credit to our producer Laura Swisher who came up with that title. And when we saw it, we were like, absolutely, yes, it was
Yep.
great. Um,
Immediately, yes.
and so I wrote about that in the piece as I went to HDS, and um, I wrote in that piece about having gone to a Kirk Franklin reunion tour concert in Los Angeles, that my co-host on the podcast, Tre'vell Anderson, and the guest on that show, Michael Chin, had put together because it was the reunion tour. It was at the Staples Center or Crypto.com Arena. And we had a suite. It was like 20 of us in a room at at this arena, and I hadn't thought about how that would change the dynamic of the space for us.
Okay.
Um, and being shoulder to shoulder with, uh, like a more open seating kind of thing could feel more like church
Yep. When I
and
saw
could
the
feel,
video, like that clip you posted, that's immediately what I thought of.
yeah, it could feel like church, and like moving through the arena to get to the room felt interesting with the group of us, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, this is churchy, but it's not church because it's a gospel concert, but it's full of churchy folk, right?
Yeah. Super Church
We
of
might not be.
Jays.
Yes, yes. We're not raising up our offering tonight. I don't expect. Right. But like, but it's a churchy environment, which
Yeah.
is inherently uncomfortable for many queer and trans people. Right.
Yep.
Especially that have been raised in this Black church tradition. And so, like, going into that room, I remember there's a moment in the video that you're talking about. I remember like stepping back to, I think I was really just going to go get snacks. And I and I turned around and saw like the silhouette of all the people with their hands raised and the hat and the hair and
Yeah.
the back and forth and I was just like,
It's a painting. Like it's a photo. Like,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I've been thinking I want to paint that actually. So I
Yeah.
love that you said that. But I remember thinking like I was in this time of figuring out if I wanted to go to divinity school and if this was the right thing for me and like what am I going for and trying to figure out the reason that I could write about and like what questions do I have, etc. And like when I saw that image, it was like, this is why I'm going.
Yep.
This moment where we can be safe in this room and have this experience without being shoulder to shoulder with people judging us, looking at us sideways, about to ask us some sideways ass question. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it was like, oh, this is the reason that I want to go.
Yep.
And that was followed up the next morning by being at open house at HDS. Right. And like the timing of that, I couldn't have put together myself. I say all that to say, when I got there, I wanted to come back. I wanted to come out of HDS with a call to action to the church to be more inclusive, to be different, to be better, to address its issues, blah, 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 and to see us as human. And relatively quickly, that shifted for me. I've done so much work in resistance, right? Fighting against systems and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I'm not interested in orienting this work in resistance. I'm interested in orienting this work in serving this community of people that I care about.
Yep.
And so when you ask me like, did I feel like HDS equipped me to do what I came in to do? I think about how when we got there, our dean, our associate dean, Diane Moore, who I think the highest of, she told us like, your project will probably change while you're here. She said the work that you're going to come here and do and the questions that you're going to ask and the things that you're going to learn, it should do something to you. It should make you ask a different question and your work is probably going to shift and mold and change and that's okay. If it doesn't change, you probably didn't need to come here to do that work. And I was like, well, damn.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And that happened. That shift of like, I'm not interested in trying to get you to see me as human, but if I shift the perspective and like I look at the people that I'm looking to serve and serve and help heal and be a part of and build community with and for and all of those different things, if I'm looking at how I can use my creativity to serve that group, that actually feels more interesting to me and it feels more generative to me. It feels more valuable to me. It feels better for community to me. Not that this advocacy work isn't important because it is,
Right.
right? Helping to change minds, helping to change hearts is part of this work too. But like, I'm actually more interested in the people in that silhouette than I am in the people who are doing the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you said more generative. Because like that's what we're thinking about is like, what is my contribution here? What is something that is going to yield some tangible result? And making it again like less so about the dismantling of this thing. While that is important, while we are investigating, interrogating that, I am also here specifically for these people that not just look like me but are me, and for the experiences that they've had that have been similar if not identical to mine. um, that is a really really great segue coming from just kind of like the scene.
Before you go to the next question, the thing
Yeah.
that you said that's so important there to me was like my contribution,
Yeah.
because I came into divinity school thinking I had to come save us all.
Right.
right? And being like, and I'm like, I don't even know how I can do that. Like, it's just me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean? Blah, blah, blah. But feeling like this big sense of pressure to like fix the problem because I'm going to
Yeah.
Harvard, right?
Yeah.
But then also like seeing how many other people are doing work in this direction, right? With this purpose, for this cause, for these people, it helped me to recognize like, oh, great, there's a lot of great work being done in this direction. And I started getting that before I got there, but like studying and like seeing the work that other people are doing, it made me recognize like I need to figure out what my contribution is. Right. And I have a note in my phone that was called my contribution. Like, what is the
Yeah.
contribution I can make? So when you said my contribution, I was like, yes, that's very much it.
You are a writer through and through, just like thinking about the notes that you have like running of, excuse me, of the idea and the idea as it is growing and evolving in real time. And just like being able to like not only mark that for yourself as a marker of like the growth and evolution, but also just to like keep track of like what I'm doing and remaining focused on the goal.
Yeah, the
Um,
notes app has been really helpful with trying to think like,
yeah.
oh wow, I said this 5 years ago to myself. Like, what?
Yeah.
You know, so well, go
It's
ahead. You had
crazy
another
seeing
question.
that sometime. So yeah, you set the scene very, very well in terms of like where you are now and also what your focus and what your contributions are. In explaining where you are, you talked about the difficulties you've had in your church experience, the difficulties you've had with your previous pastors, and how that's ultimately led you to leave the church while you were at HDS. In making the effort to like do this work to establish this contribution for these communities and also not being in community with the church, like do you feel like that distance might make that contribution more difficult for you? And if
No,
so, like no. Okay.
no. I part of this is clicking for me even as I'm getting to talk about it. But like, um, one of the things that I've been asked of like, so how did you arrive at what your final project was? Based on like this idea of what you came here for. And I my final project moved from being like a conference and a write-up in some publication about the church needs to and how y'all shoulda and this is what the
Yeah.
thing says and it went from that to being more about how can I use my creativity to serve this community. Right. And so I did an art exhibit of all the work that I did while I was at HDS. Because I had this apartment that I thought was kind of real plain looking, and I wanted it to at least look like something while I lived there. And I was like, I need to feel like an artist lives here as I was trying to embrace being an artist.
Uh,
Right. And like I kept saying that to myself, and I was like, it feels kind of bland, blah, blah, blah. It needs to I don't know, it needs to feel like an artist lives here if I'm going to be really trying to embrace artistry. And so um, I called the show An Artist Lives Here because it was held in the apartment that I lived in and made a lot of the work in. A lot of the other work was also from the studio that I was studying in. But that whole experience was about like, what is my contribution? I can use my creativity. I can use my writing. I can use my art. I can use my voice. I can use my perspective to be able to like serve us. Right.
yeah.
And like, I've spent the better part of 40 years of my life in church. I get it. Right. Like, I get what we're doing there.
Yeah.
Um, and I see it in everything, right? Like I see it in so many different ways show up in our lives that I don't need to be in church every Sunday to know how to talk to this community of people because I've been talking to this community of people my whole life.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm not concerned about that per se. I'm more so concerned about giving people with my work, giving people hope, giving people joy, giving people a sense of vision, giving people some encouragement. I think that is the contribution that I can make. And I don't feel like I need to be in a church setting to be able to know how to connect there.
In excuse me, in doing work that is like giving people hope, giving people joy, I imagine that that is just as if not more restorative for you in the process.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, like, what your relationship is to that, and that, like, this is healing for you too. Like, you were also someone that, like, experienced these traumas, that experienced, like, this dissonance while being a queer person in church. And it is not just like doing this work to service the community. I am doing this work in service of like myself also. Has that played into like how you're positioning what you're creating and like how it lives once you release it?
That's such a beautiful question because it's like really spot on because um, some of the feedback I kept getting when I was like talking to people who I respect and trust in the early parts of the divinity school. We always say div school, and then when I say that to other
Okay.
people, they'd be like, "Is that what y'all?" And I'm like, "You know what I'm saying." But like early in my div school experience, I was just kind of talking with people who I trust and respect about like what my work was going to be coming out of this, and like again, it was going to be conference and write up, and y'all need to be better and the whole
The familiar
thing.
things, yeah.
Yeah, and like because I was thinking of it, I was coming in as journalist and artist Jarrett Hill, and I was thinking of it as journalist, and it shifted to the artist side, and like they kept saying to me, the people I was talking to, like, I think you need to put more of you in this,
Mm.
and I was like, well, no, I'm not coming here for me. I'm coming here for like the community and the people like to make this different and they were like yeah that's great but you need to focus more on you and put
We
you
need to
in
see you
this.
in this.
Yeah, and like I've been telling my story my whole life and so I felt like I was coming here to do something different, right, and approach this in a different way and um I've been like okay so I was trying to process that and figure out and I was also concerned about um I just saw Kirk Franklin in an interview with Angie Martinez, and he was talking about how he doesn't know how to accept the accolades and awards and love and all that kind of stuff. He was like, I'm in a business that is very much about it not being about me,
Yeah.
right? And like
Yeah.
redirecting the attention somewhere else. And when he said that, I was like, oh my God, yes, right? And like, I haven't even been a gospel artist. I haven't been a pastor or a minister or a speaker, but like, I've always been in work where it was about the people or about God or about the work or the issue or whatever it is. But I've always been the person telling my story through that. And so I think that for people observing, it's been about me, but I haven't been focused on me. I've been focused on like the thing that we're talking about, right? And using my story in
Yep.
service to that. And so then in this instance, I was like, oh, so you want me to do what I've been doing this whole time? Okay, well, okay, right. And like the message was so consistent every time I talked to someone, I was like, okay, I need to put more of myself in this. That feels really clear. And it became, this exhibit. I was working on a stand up special and an exhibit, and they were like, Jarrett, you already have enough work to turn in this exhibit right now. You don't have to like kill yourself trying to do more and more and more to prove.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so the stand up special is something I'm developing elsewhere. As a slate of projects that I came out of here with, like a list of things that I want to do and create um, while I was there that I came up with that I want to do in the years following. Did I answer your
That
question at all?
you did. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I love that you brought up that Angie Martinez interview about Kirk and about how for him it was important. Like what resonated with you was the industry of gospel music and like the industry of church and like the performance of church. So much of it is placing the focus elsewhere, be it the church, be it God, be it the congregation, right? And he did an interview with Shannon Sharp for Club Shay Shay. And he talked about how early in his career, Prince reached out and wanted to work with him. And he was talking about like how in those moments, and he looks back on it kind of like regretfully now, like in those moments, Kirk was like at like the beginnings of his career, like going into like his peak, and that like his career became known for like the boundaries that he was pushing. And so that alignment with Prince, him looking back on it now, seems to have made so much sense. But in the same way that the church redirects the focus of your work into something outside of you, he was talking about like how constricted he felt and like how he ultimately turned that opportunity down and missed out on like what could have been like some incredible like, creative work um, as a result of it. And I'm curious, like, in what ways, now that you've been through diff school, have you seen your work or your voice in like those ways be just kind of like constricted by the church?
Um, I have seen myself feel more free in a lot of ways since div school. Um, I think that one of the major moments that really kind of changed everything for me happened in like November, October-ish, like early in my div school experience. I was thinking like, oh, I hope that a year is enough time to really get into the shit. Like I was really feeling that. And then
Yeah.
like 2 months in, I got like, oh, the thing clicked for me in a way that I was not expecting. I was in this class called Sin, Sex, and Race. It was taught by Dr. Wendy Millette. And she is a queer woman, and it is addressing the ways in which we see sin, the ways that we see sex, and the ways that we see race, and like putting them in context with one another. And it wasn't something that someone said particularly that clicked the thing for me, but it was more so having read what this person has to say about what is sin and what is not, and then what this person had to say. And these are like big thinkers who shape the way we think about these things, right? And there was this person and that person and that person and this person and that person and this person and that person. And none of them were saying the same thing, right?
Right.
Which is why we were reading different people. But it was like they all had a bit of a different perspective on it. And it clicked to me like, and I wrote this in my final paper, it clicked to me that sin is like what we consider crime when we think about legality,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In my paper, I wrote this. I had at the end of the semester, Wicked had come out, and I was feeling a way about Glinda and Elphaba. So I wrote this piece called "The Wicked Construction of Queer Sin," and I opened it up with this clip from Fanti where I was saying like, the law is not representative of what is right or wrong. The law is representative of who is in power,
Yes.
right? And like the law is constructed. The law is something that is written. The law is something that we agree to, right? To some degree. But like,
Just agree.
but the law is something that is constructed and crime is like constructed out of that. And like the word is constructed.
Mm-hmm.
And like in the paper, if I'm going to release it at some point, but like I use the word, I capitalize the W in word when I don't use capitalization anywhere else. I write in all lowercase because I was uncomfortable even in November still, like speaking about the word in this way, but knowing that I was right.
Yeah.
Right. So I capitalized the
Yeah.
W, which my professor was like, what's that about?
What is that
Right.
about? Yeah.
But I was like, the word is constructed, right? It is written by people. It is edited. It is like put together in a certain order. Things are taken out, right? Things are used and not used, seen and not seen, talked about, not talked about, right? It is constructed. And out of that, sin is constructed,
Yes.
right? And like sin is a construct of power. That really fucked me up. It felt revelatory and obvious at the same time,
Yeah.
but it made me recognize like the ways that our blackness is criminalized, the ways that our queerness is criminalized, our existences are criminalized. That is a choice.
Mm.
It is not self-evident. It is not inherent, right? It is a choice. And so when you come at me talking about your homophobia or your transphobia or your racism or whatever, all of these things are choices,
Yes.
right? And I think in Black church, in church in general, we are made to believe that these things that are sins are self-evident and they just that's what it is. And it's like, no, 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 y'all choose what these sins are because you'll rewrite the rules whenever you feel like it. Ask the Mormon church how they felt about black people in the 70s. Ask them how they felt about queer people in 2013. Ask them how they changed the rules, right? Ask the Christians how they've changed. You get it.
Yeah.
After that clarity, I felt so like, oh, I don't have to subscribe to any of this shit.
Yeah.
Right. And I've been saying to him, I've been saying for a while, like, I'm a black queer artist. I don't have to sign up for none of this. Right.
Yeah.
Your ideas around relationships and monogamy and marriage and sex and sexuality and how I can show up and what I need to wear and how I need to speak and how I need to, I don't have to sign up for any of this. Right. And it made me feel more free, but I also still felt like I've been a journalist, I've been president of an organization, I'm a professor, I'm author. I have to show up in these kinds of ways. I have to be respectable, right, all the time, and whatever that means. And like Div School has changed that for me because I'm like, I feel like more affirmed in the ways that I had already been thinking, but
Yeah.
now I feel clear, like, oh, this is what it is for me at
Yeah.
this point, and I can feel more free to like show up in my sexuality, to show up in how I want to dress, to show up in how I want to speak, to show up in how I want to write, etc. Like, I don't have those same restrictions that I felt like I had before, and now I have to build my own ethic for like, how do I see these things and what is good or bad for myself and what feels right and what doesn't, etc. So
It sounds like it had less of a direct impact on your creative output and more on freeing you existing, and then that then informing the freeing of like your creative output. Am I understanding that? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. It like it unlocked something for me, and like so much art came out after that. Like
Yeah.
when I look at my place, like I had done so few things, and I don't know that there's like a direct correlation to like that day I started doing more shit, but like there's a lot more art after that than there was before, right? Like things started to come out. And I don't know that it was like, oh my God, I'm a free artist now, right? I don't think it was that, but it was just like, oh, I can see so much more widely. And like I took an abstraction class in my second semester because I wanted to figure out you speaking in a different language, right? I've been a writer and a speaker using words all the time, and I wanted to be able to speak in a different language. And about 3 weeks in, I had done a bunch of work that I really enjoyed. And one of my favorite pieces that I've made is called Great Again. And it is an assignment that we had that was Order to Chaos in 4 panels.
I love this one.
And like after that, my professor was like, love this. This is amazing. It was right after like the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl when she was giving me feedback. She was like, this should have been in the Super Bowl. I was like, love that. Yeah, say that again.
It is really
Right.
good. It is really
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. But like she came to me and she was like, everything doesn't have to say something, right? Everything doesn't have to have content, which felt like an abstract artist read. Um,
A little bit. A little bit.
yeah, but then I felt like, okay, well, let me not try to always say something so much. Let me like see
Yeah.
what this painting wants to be. And it felt free to like just try color and shape and line and dots have become a thing for me and lines and things like that. So
I love that. Hey, so I want to shift gears a little bit, or maybe less so, because we are talking about like your professors there. You shared how impactful Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas's class was for you, exploring the moral imaginary through Black women's fictional literature. Can you just like gas her up for a little bit and like stand out for like what that class meant for you?
um so I should say like I did not have a professor at Harvard that I did not like or even really love or enjoy.
Yeah.
Um my second semester all my professors were Black, with the exception of my program leader, which was a whole thing. But I had all Black professors that second semester, and I had all women the first semester, and it was just like I got an amazing lineup of professors that I'm really, really grateful for and hope to do more work with in the future. Um, Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas. So I took her class that you named, the title of which is a sentence, exploring the moral imaginary in Black women's fictional literature. I took that in the first semester, and in the second semester, I took her class, Womanist Theology. which was also just like an incredible opportunity to be in the room with this iconic woman in this field. Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas is one of the first women to be ordained in the Episcopal Church. She is a very fly, swaggy, but also sweet
Yeah.
and like funny and approachable and kind and beautiful hearted human being. She always came into class with a look. It was always a moment, right? But like one of the ways that I find myself often describing her is by the way that she lectures. Um, I loved being in the room. It felt like a different world, like being
Yeah.
in the room with this woman. And I went to Clark Atlanta, I should say as well. But like she is the kind of professor who will be really up here,
Yeah.
right? Right, like she's that person. She comes in with she's a preacher. She's a
I was just about to
minister.
say. Yep.
Yeah, so she's got like that kind of a powerful delivery, but also like passion that comes from a lived experience, from a study, from a knowledge, from a wisdom. Um, and I loved being in her class every week. And so like being able to have her first and second semester was one of the highlights of my life. And to like have her phone number and like be able to reach out to her and like we might see each other in Europe while I'm there um, was just like amazing. She's
I love that.
an incredible person. I'm excited to know.
Yeah, I'd seen some of like your writing about taking her class, and the sentiment was just like apparent, just like through and through. And so I wanted to be able to like have that moment for you. We've done a really, really good job of just kind of like setting the stage and like the context of what your experience in div school was like. And so now I want to talk a little bit more about how that changed you, like how that shifted you some like more. What's the biggest perspective shift that you've come away with in the time between starting and finishing div school?
Um, well, number one, I think sin as a construct of power was
It's a big one.
incredibly like paradigm shifting for me.
Yeah.
Um, which I think kind of helped me with the other big shift for me, which has been like I I have always questioned the way that we depict God in church. And I don't even just mean like as a powerful white man, because like we all know that that's some bullshit. But like I have been like really trying to wrap my mind around feeling more and more clear that God is not like an authoritarian power sitting up on a throne, sitting up high, looking down low, judging us about what we do and don't do. Religion is doing that,
Right.
right? Um, I think of God more as a power, as a source in the way that we use that language, more than I think about it as a power structure who's interested in control. And I mean, oddly enough, that's even kind of biblical, right? Like
Mm,
we talk about co-creating our existences, our lives, with faith and hope and prayer and all those different things. And so I don't even think it's like a wild concept, right?
right.
But religion adds this authoritarian kind of perspective, which is even more frustrating to watch in the current moment that we're in America with Donald Trump. And so I'm that was another moment of like I've been wrapping my mind around this for a few years, and then in divinity school, it really clicked for me. And one of my final papers, I think in my final paper for An Artist Lives Here, which was my master's final. Um, if you're a Christian, you know that church is no place for questions of Christianity, right? Like it is not a place to be able to be like, what or why or how come or when did and how come and what. And like being in divinity school, it was like, oh, I'm sitting with people who have studied this. who teach this, who can answer my questions or tell me, I don't know, but this is how we think
Yeah.
about this, or this is what I've been pondering, or what have you. Um, that was like really, really paradigm shifting for me. And like, even that was seeded, I think, in the very first class, the first week of classes, in a class I was in called Theories and Methods of the Study of Religion. Um, in which one of those things that we did on the first day was our professor asked us like to define religion.
Yeah.
And it's a lecture hall with 150 people in it. And like, we spent an hour and a half talking about our different definitions of what religion is, which was a question I had never even asked myself. Like, as a category, what fits in here and what doesn't?
Mm.
I hadn't like really sat with that question in this way, as opposed to like the quick way that we kind of think about it when we're scrolling on Instagram or having a conversation with people. And like that opened up this question about certainty, which was, in church, we talk about God and faith with certainty. God is blank. God does blank. God wants blank. God said blah. God promised blah, with certainty. And we praise and we worship and we're all about that, right? With certainty.
Yeah.
But like, we don't talk about as much the uncertainty, right? Of like, is this what that thing is? There's a scripture about God help my disbelief, right?
Yeah.
Which is like kind of touching on that. And we can that's its own sermon, right? But it's like, we don't really sit with the fact that we don't know what God wants, what God thinks, what God says, how God shows up, the myriad capabilities of God, etc. And so releasing my attachment to certainty really opened up this space for me to be like, yeah, I don't think God is that thing. Right. And I
Yeah.
feel like I'm right about that. Like, I can ask questions and get answers to that. So those are some things that really
I
shifted for me.
yeah, that is uh, particularly the point about the way that uncertainty is framed. Like, first of all, it is like a lesser discussed concept in sermons, in Bible studies, in like congregations in general, right? And in my experience in the churches that I've gone to, like having grown up in church, um, it is usually positioned in a way as like a standalone concept rather than what you were just talking about, it being like a through line that is threaded through every conversation that we have, or every parable, or every story, every sermon, in a way that like, this is what we are taking from this today, or this is what we're taking from this in this context. But there are still things that we are uncertain about. And like, the learning could be in the wrestling with that, or like the interrogation of that.
Yes,
Yeah. I
absolutely.
just, you bringing that up just kind of like turned something for me with that, as
Well,
that
and I
thought.
think to that point, like, it helped me to also better appreciate the reasons that we don't get to ask questions, right?
Yeah.
The reasons we don't get to ask questions is oftentimes the people don't have an answer for the questions, right? I remember last year, was it last year? I think it was in 2024. The church that I was going to, the Potter's House, we had done this thing called Wednesday School, which was
Mm.
like weeks and weeks of like taking a specific class with different themes or whatever. And I actually think it's a really smart concept because it does allow you to ask questions, right? But it was always like, in this context for these weeks on Wednesday nights, right? Um, and I was taking this class about the life of Jesus because I've been really challenged by Jesus, especially in the current context when Jesus means something different to them than it does to us.
For sure.
And and like early in that first class, the pastor who's speaking, she's talking about Jesus's early life. And like, for people who don't know, like, we see Jesus as a little boy, and we then like go, I think it's like 18 years of his life where we don't see Jesus, and then he pops back up and he's 30.
Hmm.
And like, we don't know what he's doing in that time, right? There's no documentation in the Bible about that. There's really not much like clear research on like what Jesus was doing, right? Where he
Yeah.
was, if he was out dipping and doing the things, if he was like in study, we don't know, right? We don't really have a lot of information about that. And so the pastor's up there and she's talking and she's saying how, Jesus is just so relatable. And like for single people, if you're looking for an example, Jesus was single and he can be your example. Isn't that so relatable? And I was like, hell no. Right? Like Jesus is a 30-year-old virgin who's never allegedly been in any kind of like romantic interaction with another human being. He's
What at
perfect. He's
all about
Jesus's
that?
child. Like what is
Yeah.
relatable? Right.
What?
And like, I remember being 38 and I'm now 40, but I remember 37, 38, like in my late 30s and thinking like church is never talking to me about sex.
Mm-hmm.
The only conversation about sex is be a virgin until you get married. And then when you get married, have sex, but don't be having too much and don't enjoy it too much. And we're not going to talk
Yep.
about it. It's only going to be in sarcasm. Right. And I'm not a virgin. I'm not looking for a virgin. I'm not like trying to like hold up this purity culture shit. Right. I'm like, y'all
Yeah.
don't have any message to me about sex. And the idea that Jesus is hella relatable now, right? Because he's
What are we
single
talking
and,
about?
right. I say that to say, like, I asked this question in church in that class, and it was, I like a parenthetical. So why was in a parenthetical, but it was like, why is it important that we believe Jesus was single?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I sat through the whole class with that question loaded in my thing, nervous to ask it because I was like, this feels like a disruptive question. And like, feeling uncomfortable and recognizing like, I've sat across from the chief of the LAPD and told him, I think you're lying in my face.
Why now am I worried about being disruptive?
Right? I can say to my parents, like, this is a problem for me and I don't think you should be doing XYZ, but I'm in church
Yep.
right now and I'm scared to anonymously put this question in the app to hit send. There's
Yeah.
something that's not working,
Yeah.
right? There's something that's wrong. And so that moment I remember like I submitted the question with no knowledge of like, are there 100 questions in queue or are there 2 questions in queue? And like I put my question in and like the next question they bring up, the reader, she's like, of the questions, she's like, well, this is a hard one. And now I'm feeling like, oh my God, I'm being a bad boy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is some childhood shit. I feel like a kid in this setting.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And the pastor went on to give an answer that I felt was insufficient, but like she was happy with, I guess. And like it made me really sit with like this questions thing. Like I can't even ask a question in here and feel like
Yeah.
comfortable about that. But like,
So effective.
yeah,
So
yeah.
effective.
And like so many of us have questions that we don't ever get answered, that we don't ever feel comfortable asking, and we never get answers to. And like being in divinity school gave me the opportunity to be like, okay, so it's never made sense to me
Mm-hmm.
this, right? One of the questions for me that I really sat with and like really shifted things for me was like, so are Adam and Eve the first people on earth or are they the first people in this story?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's two very different things.
Entirely. Entirely. Yeah.
Right. And so like Adam and Eve are suggested to have been here 6 to 10,000 years ago, but people have been on Earth for over 100,000 years. How does that make sense?
Right.
Right. Um, yes, there's been a lot of shifting and changing and
Yep.
molding and all that.
Thank you for taking us through that journey. I think a lot of times, and like I was trying to structure my questions in that way, a lot of times we get beginning and end, and very little of the time is like, all right, well, like what was the journey in between there? Or at least like the important parts. And for this conversation specifically, because people have like that fear, that unwillingness, that like hesitancy in asking questions, especially when it comes to religion, excuse me, understanding like that in between, like that hallway is so important. For me, I'm speaking as me. I want to shift gears a little bit. One of the things that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation is how there are things that like we still hold on to, um, uncomfortably or comfortably, but like whether through the feeling that we have and relationship that we have to them personally, whether through the continuous grip of like the conditioning of the church. For whatever reason, like these are things that are still important to us, that are still comforting for us, that are still grounding to us. In your time in div school and in acquiring like this new skill set, this new knowledge, are there things that like you now have like a firmer grasp on? It's like, yes, I do still enjoy this. And this is like now more firm for me.
Hmm. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is about sex and
Okay.
sexuality. Um, I've been trying to like,
Spicy.
I know, right? Well, like in the work that I'm interested in doing when I come back, I'm going to be, um, assuming sabbatical doesn't change me in ways that I don't expect. Like I want to talk to Kirk Franklin. What?
I want to put a pin on that. Why are you assuming that you won't be transformed during sabbatical? The purpose of
Um,
which is to
there's definitely a world where I go away on sabbatical and I come back like, yes, bitch, now I'm ready to do all the things. There's also
Yeah,
a world where I go away on sabbatical and I'm like, I don't want to come back to none of this shit. Right. And that is my concern.
got you.
So I'm like, I don't know how it's going to affect me, change me, shape me, what have you. And the work that I'm interested in doing next, like I want to talk to Kirk Franklin. I think Kirk Franklin has a very interesting perspective. I want to talk to Kim Burrell. I want to talk to like some people who I've seen change in real time
Yeah,
through media, not up close.
yeah,
But like I feel like we're starting to have more conversation around sexuality, right? Queerness and the ways that we show up under the alphabet umbrella and like the who's included in there and those different kinds of things. But I also started to see us talk about sex in different ways. And like I know for myself, I'm like one of the things that we talked about in Womanist Theology with Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas, who I love to call Professor Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas to her. Um, she was talking about how whenever power is oppressing a community, there will always be a sexualized caricature of that community. We see this with women, we see this with Black people, we see this with queer people, we see this with trans people, like, and myriad
yeah.
other places, right? And those are just the intersections that I'm focused on here. But like the sexualized caricature of these groups is always decided and prominent, right? Queer people, it's just we're just horny, angry, like
Yeah.
raping and pillaging, like doing all kinds of things that are immoral and awful and terrible, right? Women,
Literally positioning Sodom and Gomorrah as a story about queerness or like queerness being like the downfall to the
don't even
point.
get me
Yes.
started on like biblical homosexuality because that was something that
Yeah.
really hit for me. We can talk about that, but like I started to recognize like the ways that we talk about, think about sex are so pure, like wrapped up in this purity culture
Yep.
that is all about religion and power and not about God,
Yeah.
right? And God wants us to this and God wants us to that. Well, where do we get that message? Well, it's in the Bible or my pastor had, so this is in church, right? Like church has a church, like any institution, has a responsibility to sustain itself,
Yep.
right? And being able to have power and control over people is how you do that.
Yep.
And telling them that you need to go bring more people in here is how you do that, right? You mix the Christianity and the capitalism, and those things are like, it needs to grow and grow and grow, or it's not successful. Not
Yeah.
people need to get better. People need to be encouraged. People need to be lifted up. People need to have a hope. People need to have a vision. Those, we don't measure those about success. How many members you got?
Es- Especially when we're thinking about like the origins of the Black church specifically and it being a direct tool of subjugation and then
Come
going
on.
into this thing that we're talking about now. But go ahead, sir.
Yes. Yes. No, like it just, there are so many ways that that shows up. And like, I'm really, really challenged by a lot of that. Um, I want to make sure I'm answering your question though.
Yeah. So just bringing it back to what are the things that like you feel closer to having gone through this study?
So I feel like I'm really wanting to explore my sexuality in different ways now that I'm like, I am like,
Is
I've
it
been, for years, I've been identified as a non monogamous poly person. Um,
okay?
but I'm
We will come
also
back to that
like,
conversation later. I did not know this.
yeah, I feel like monogamy is something that is like part of a power structure as well that I don't have to participate in. Monogamy is very much
Yeah.
like about patriarchy and controlling women's bodies. And like I'm not interested in the patriarchy or like I'm not a woman. Like and I'm not interested in I'm gay. Like I'm not even in romantic interaction with women. And so it's like,
Yep.
why am I connected? Why am I so like attached to this? Why haven't we asked a follow up question about like, why am I doing this? Right.
Oh God.
And like, that's been challenging for me. Also, like, as a Christian, I'm like, we are so attached to monogamy in Christianity, but like, how many monogamous relationships do you see in the Bible? Like, how many couples do, that's a whole other conversation. But like,
I
I,
actually like for a quick second, like that is to get back to your point, and I do want to let you answer the things that you feel closer to having gone through study. But like to get back to the point that you made about um the church needing to sustain itself, right? Like, and this is something that I learned through witnessing on TikTok, is that like the minute that you attempt to apply like the meagerest level of critical thought or critical analysis to like these concepts, to these decrees, to like the commandments, to any of like these teachings and doctrine, the minute that you just like attempt to apply like any level of critical thinking or analysis, not only is it difficult to get a cohesive, definitive answer from the text, it is even less so from the teachers of the text. And like that is something that is endlessly frustrating for me. And I think that if the church, TM, took a more curious approach to teaching and to engaging with the text and engaging with the religion itself, that would serve it so much better than these are the things, these are the tenets, these are the decrees, these are the commandments. There is no deviation from these things, and there is no justification beyond what I am saying to you.
so I'm so with you here. One of the things that really like, I had a conversation with one of my classmates, and it was one of the things that I walked away from it like shook a little bit. Like, oh my god, yeah. I was talking with one of my classmates. His name is Elijah, and I was asking him. I was still like in this area of like wanting to like write this thing and do a conference and change the church, right? And I was asking him like he was interested in similar work, and I was asking him what he thought like were the big challenges to being effective in that kind of change. And he was talking about education. And like, I want to acknowledge like the privilege in this conversation of being at Harvard and what that means to people who feel the way that they do about the educational community, right? And then I'm not coming from that perspective because like I'm a college dropout. Going to Harvard was never something that I was expecting. This has been way beyond my expectations of myself educationally. But Elijah was saying to me, he was like, "Do you know how many churches there are? If we're just talking about the Black church, right? Thousands of churches. Like there are. I'm in Atlanta right now, and like if I were to do a 2 mile scan of just this area, right?
Over
Churches, churches,
indexing.
churches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? And every church has a pastor, and that pastor is the theological producer, if you will, for the community that he's leading,
Yeah.
right? And I say he because most of them are men, right? Um, but even when women are leading these congregations, like they are are giving theology to people, right? And when I say theology, Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas describes or defines theology as, and I don't know that this is her words specifically, but in class we say theology is faith seeking understanding,
Mm.
right? And when we think about our theology, it is what we believe and how we think about those things that we believe, etc. And it is not faith getting understanding. It is
It
faith
is seeking.
seeking understanding, right?
Yeah.
Trying to ask the question, trying to better understand. And I find like so many pastors don't have any kind of religious education. And I don't, again, mean going to Harvard Divinity School. I mean, like any kind of formal study of scripture, of where scripture came from, of how scripture evolved, how scripture has changed, how scripture has been used in history. Like,
Yep.
no education, but just the book,
Yep.
right? And like the Bible and in Christianity to me, and like probably in other religions as well, when we think about sacred texts, like nowhere else do you only study the source material,
Right.
right? And like in Christianity, studying the word means reading it again,
Yeah.
not like really getting into what they were saying and what was at the time and who wrote it and what did that mean and why did this go here and what was the context of these people and why would they say that? That doesn't even, none of that. Is just read it again and see what the
Yeah.
Lord says to you.
It's single source education.
Yes, right. Um,
Like,
the sing we people can Google like the challenges of a single story, right? I think that's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, but like the single story does not have enough context, right? And like these pastors that don't necessarily get the opportunity to have a theological education or religious education of some sort are now producing theology and putting it into other people who are walking out into the world with that. And
yeah.
also, our governmental systems and mega churches and TikTok and Instagram are all shaping our theology, right? And so when you go into church and you have a question about is God, I mean, is are Adam and Eve the first people or the first people in this story, and your pastor may not have asked himself that question, you are you're letting the devil use you, asking me these kind of questions.
Verbatim, like those words verbatim.
Yeah,
Those words
right.
verbatim.
Or you're
Yeah.
asking a question in Wednesday school, trying to get understanding on what we mean and why we say that. And you get an answer that is a response, but not an answer. And you're left unsatisfied and feeling guilty for having asked the question in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That was a very like that was an us tangent.
yeah.
And I love that. Like that. Yeah, it is my current and like ever existing like frustration and just like the um very intentional direction away from asking questions and being curious and interrogating these things. I have one more question for you, but before we get to it, um, you were starting to say that you were feeling closer to like your sexuality and being more explorative. So to me, based off what you shared so far, it sounds like in being at div school and having this training and acquiring this new knowledge, it was more freeing for you, as we were talking about earlier, and that like, oh, I no longer feel beholden to these things. And whereas I was already in the place of being more exploratory, more non-traditional in my practices, now understanding this thing better, I am even more committed to that. Is that like a good summation?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel that in sexuality, I feel that in sex, but I also feel that in creativity. I feel that
Yeah.
in the ways that I can show up in the world, right? I don't feel so confined by what this power structure tells me I have to be or how I have to show up or what I have to do, what I have to want, what I have to believe, what I have to know or think. Like, I don't feel committed to this shit anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And like, that's also, I think it can sound very empowering and exciting, and it is, but it's also very disorienting in a lot of ways. Right? It's like,
Yeah. What do I do now?
what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's a lot of trying to wrap my mind around like, I don't see this like that anymore. I'm
Yeah.
making decisions, informed decisions, maybe hopefully educated decisions, um, discerning decisions about like what I think and believe about things now every day. And like a really practical example for that, someone was saying to me the other day, like, oh, we are so blessed and highly favored. And I was like, I know what you mean. And I
Yeah.
received that. But
The
like,
sentiment.
I've spent the last 6 months in divinity school arguing with my classmates about favor isn't something that makes sense to me. Right. Like, so wait, what is favor? Like, favor is God choosing me as a favorite because so God likes me more than the Palestinian children, is what we're saying. I just want
And
to
is
be
that
clear.
temporal? Like, is that specific to like right now, or is this like ongoing? And to what extent? Yeah.
Yes. And like, and what do we do with that information?
What do we, right?
Right. And so the idea of God showing me favor feels great. Honey, everybody wants to be God's favorite. Don't get me wrong. Right. But also, it's like,
Hashtag God's favorite.
you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
feels great, but it's also like, but what do I mean when I say that?
Yeah.
Because like the homeless person down the street, does God not like them as much?
Yep.
Is God blessing me more because insert whatever measures of success that we have getting those things? Like, was that what we're saying? I'm just frustrated by that.
Yeah. I think that's a great you're breaking a lot of rules, and you are um however reluctantly or enthusiastically you go into this, like this is like we're in solidly disruptive territory now. And that being the
Oh
case,
God.
like your perspective having shifted so drastically, and knowing that you want to go into community building, and this, you may not necessarily have a solid idea on this yet, but from where you sit now, the community that you are seeking to build for queer people with regards to their relationship to faith, to religion, to church, what does that look like? What do you hope that that grows into being? Again, like from where you sit right now.
Child, I don't know.
Yeah, I figured.
Next question.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Next question, Tamika.
I I I don't know. And when I say like there's work that I'm excited to come back and like jump into, um, I think that will be part of it. But I don't know for sure like how all of that is going to manifest itself. I can say like I just shot this video that I'll be putting out soon that is me telling my story and using a scripture because I was aiming to do a stand-up special last year that I just didn't have the time and energy for, and I ended up using a concept that I was doing in that to do a sermon for a class that I had to do. And then I ended up taking that and making it a longer version and all these other things. It's called So That Nothing Is Lost. And after I like did the long form version of it at HDS, like I kept getting people coming up to me being like, so like, are you going to be a pastor? Because if you were going to be a pastor, you could be my pastor. And I was like,
Everybody
um,
calm down.
right, everybody calm down, right? And my friends are always like, hey, pastor, hey, bishop, hey. And I'm like, y'all don't even understand that. I don't
Bishop
even like,
Hill.
it's like, stop, because I'm like, I don't even like believe in this
Yeah.
anymore in the same way. And the idea of like leading a faith community feels very misaligned for me because I'm like, you don't want me getting up here and saying, how many monogamous couples you see in the Bible? You don't want that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, Now, mind you, I'll come and do it, but you don't want it. Let me tell you, right? And so I'm like, is there a world where I see myself like giving a sermon somewhere? Sure, maybe. I'm a public speaker with some level of, you know, profile or whatever, and like I can do that. But like I'm not interested in that right now. It doesn't even resonate for
Yeah.
me as like something that makes sense. In this video, I am telling my story and using this scripture to do so, but it's not, I'm not like preaching. I'm having a conversation with a friend about my experience and how this story in the Bible kind of felt like it reminded me of that. But like, I don't think that all of the videos that I'll be doing are all going to be using a scripture. I don't feel that right now, right? It might be a song, or it might be something that I saw or that I heard or whatever. And so I'm challenged by that because I'm like, well, what are what are people going to think if I put this out? They're going to be like, oh, Jared's starting a church, and I'm like, no, girl, I'm just saying this thing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I do think it will be in my creative work, in the writing that I'll do and the creating that I'll do. As I said, I'm working on a stand up special, but I'm working on a new show that I'll be launching at the top of the year that I'll be doing weekly, and trying to bring this perspective to those conversations without necessarily leading a faith community of some sort, because I'm not sure that that's what I want to do. I'm always interested in building community, but like religion is not really how I see that coming together for me.
Yeah. That is a great bookend. I am super excited for you on sabbatical and what that brings for you, what that brings out of you, and the Bishop Hill that we get on your return. I'm super
You
excited
see,
about
you
that.
see, you see.
Thank you so much, Jared, for this conversation. This was really, really dope. I know it was a long time in the making, but it was absolutely worth it for me, especially being in this place of like questioning and challenging and being curious. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. These are really, really thoughtful questions that were great for me to process out loud and share. So thank you.
Wrestle with, yeah, absolutely. All right. Bye, y'all.